I would like to call the meeting to order for Monday, January 28th. In accordance with Section 28 of the Police Services Act and our own procedural bylaw, the Board is required to elect a chair and vice chair at its first meeting each year. I will now open the floor to nominations for the position of chair.
I would like to nominate Councillor Diane Deans as chair.
Do I have a seconder? There being no further nominations, I would like to call for a motion to close the nominations for the position of chair. Seeing only one nominee, Member Deans, you have been declared the chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board. I'll now turn the meeting and subsequent election of vice chair over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I would now like to open the floor to nominations for the position of vice chair. Do I have a mover? Member Velikat and seconder? Member Egline? Okay, any other further nominations? Seeing none, I would like to call for a motion to close the nominations.
Okay. Oh, sorry, my microphone wasn't on. I would like to nominate Member Smallwood, please.
Good point. We do need a member. Okay. So, and Councillor Egline, you're seconding. And are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I would like to close nominations and declare, I take it you will accept the nomination? Okay, good. So we'll declare you Vice Chair of the Police Services Board for 2019. Okay, so before we begin the agenda tonight, I would like to acknowledge, are they still here? Matt Pearson's group? Is Matt here? No, he's gone? Okay. He had his second-year journalism students from Carleton here, so I told him I would acknowledge them, but they seem to have left. No. The students, are the students from Carleton here? Oh, look at that. Okay, so welcome to the second-year Matt Pearson's journalism students from Carleton University. Let's give them a welcome. Okay. Okay, so on the ceremonial items, the Ottawa Police Gala check presentation to the Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group Foundation, the Great Canadian Theatre Company, and Beechwood Cemetery. Are they all here? Yeah? Yeah. Okay, Chief, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 9th annual Ottawa Police Gala was held on October 27, 2018 at the Shaw Centre. It was another huge success with regards to recognizing and celebrating the service of our members to the community while raising funds to improve the lives of residents. I'm happy to report that close to $99,000 was raised to support our community. The Ottawa Sports and Entertainment Group, or OSEG, was selected as the Tier 1 beneficiary for their creation of a new program giving at-risk youth opportunities to gain valuable work experience and expose them to new career avenues. Funds raised will provide financing for 3 years of this program. The Great Canadian Theatre Company was selected as beneficiary for their work with kids. Through referrals from the Ottawa Boys and Girls Club, their program teaches language, empowerment, and self-confidence to help students thrive into adulthood. Both programs provide skills and opportunities for youth to create brighter futures for themselves. As well, gala proceeds were donated to the Beechwood Cemetery for the Ottawa Police Service Memorial Cemetery as a way of honoring those who have dedicated their lives to serving our community. On ressent une grande fierté du fait d'avoir un lieu qui nous est propre et où nous pouvons pouvoir témoigner notre respect envers vos frères et sœurs qui sont morts en service ou nous ont quittés. Au-delà de l'événement en soi, on peut constater les effets durables du gala, comme les fonds que nous recueillons pour aider des organismes de bienfaisance locaux à proposer aux plus vulnérables de nos citoyens des services et des programmes d'une grande nécessité. None of this would have been possible without our support of our sponsors. The generosity and commitment of sponsors have demonstrated by supporting the gala confirms why this city is one of the best places to live. We appreciate every sponsor, donor, and volunteer. We could not have accomplished any of this without them. The 10th Annual Ottawa Police Service Gala will take place on Saturday, November 9th, 2019 at the Shaw Centre. And the application process for beneficiaries will us enhance the safety of our community while keeping you completely anonymous. It's important that when you see something happening in your neighborhood that you contact us, whether it's through Crime Stoppers or by filing a report online or calling us. 2 weeks ago, our missing persons section began an investigation into the disappearance of Susan Kuplu. Last week, that search became a homicide investigation. 2 people are now charged with second-degree murder in her death. This evening, we have a presentation by Deputy Chief Steve Bell and his team on improvements we are making to community policing. This past weekend, we saw an example of how we are responding to community needs. Officers have received public complaints about drug trafficking on a Montfort Street address in Vanier. Working with a community police officer, frontline officers conducted surveillance on the property. And with the assistance of other investigative techniques, a search warrant was obtained by a drug unit and executed on Saturday. 9 people were found in the residence, and one of the residents of the house was arrested. A quantity of 3 different types of morphine and oxycontin and digital scales were found. 1 man is facing several charges, including possession for the purpose of trafficking. While this was a small-scale dealer, we recognize the disruption this type of activity can have on a neighborhood. Today, I'm announcing publicly my intent to retire at the end of my current contract, which expires on May 4th, 2019. For 35 years, I've served this community with pride as a police officer. For the past 7 years, I've had the distinct privilege and honor to lead the best police service in Canada. The nation's capital is blessed to have women and men of such high caliber who are committed and passionate about keeping Ottawa safe. Our civilian and sworn members honor the uniform they wear and the police service they represent. Time after time, they have stepped up and faced adversity on many levels with courage and protected our community. Our members understand that we are here to serve our community first and foremost. In the coming months, I'm sure that I'll have the opportunity to thank all those who have helped me achieve this position. I've been fortunate to have been supported by an amazing team, and together we have accomplished a great deal. I'm proud of our collective effort, but we have more work to do. The Ottawa Police Service is fortunate to have the right people who have the experience and the ability to continue leading this amazing police service into the future. As we transition to new leadership, I remain focused on supporting our members, presenting a budget that meets our emerging community needs, submitting our business plan that provides a roadmap for the next 3 years, and supporting my executive and the board in developing a transition plan. Madam Chair, that's my verbal report.
Okay, thank you very much for your verbal update. And Chief, on behalf of the board, we want to wish you all the best in your upcoming retirement. You have certainly overseen the service through some challenging days and times and issues, and we have very much appreciated your leadership. So we look forward to working with you over the next few months as the board begins its search for your successor. One of the items in camera this evening is for the board to begin its discussions on the process we wish to follow for the recruitment of a new chief. So we will be starting that conversation later today. Any questions to the chief on his verbal report? Seeing none, received. Item number 2, community policing. Deputy Chief Bell.
Madam Chair, community policing is a cornerstone of how we do business here in Ottawa, and we want to continue informing and educating the board and the community as to what we do as a police service to make sure that we continue building relationships and helping prevent and solving crimes. So I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Chief C. Bell, because I've run out of things to say, Steve.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having us tonight. So what I'd like to start off by saying is thank you for your interest in community policing. This board, as we've started to develop, as they've started to come together, has been really clear that community policing is an important issue to you. We know that's an issue that extends from the community as well as from other councillors, and it's something that we take very seriously. Everybody knows that in the last couple of years we've changed our service delivery model. At the beginning of January 2017, we implemented the service delivery model that we're using right now, and in that we knew that before and during the early days of implementation there was lots of discussion around how are you going to deliver community policing, what is community policing going to look like moving ahead. One of the things we know is the new service delivery model created more flexibility with our resources. It increased the number of officers on the front line at any given time. It also created better systems to bring information in from our community through formalized community networks. So a bunch of things we're going to get into tonight in terms of details. One of the areas that we've heard loud and clear is that the community didn't see the speed in response to the issues that they were identifying to us, that we had some service delivery gaps. We heard that, we've listened, and we're in the process of making changes to address that gap. Since June of last year, we've had inspectors and staff sergeants talking to frontline members, talking to members of the community, and trying to figure out what is our best way forward to make sure that we're being responsive to the community from a community policing perspective. What we're going to lay out for you tonight is the plan that we have to move ahead and discuss all what we're doing currently and what we plan to do through the rest of the year. We believe that the plan that we've developed addresses those concerns that have been identified. Community policing is actually the most important function that we do as a policing service. Broadly defined, it's about police and community coming together to identify crime and social disorder issues and figuring out how we respond to those to make the communities and neighborhoods that people live in safe. In Ottawa, we know that community policing is everyone's responsibility. All of our officers have a responsibility to engage in it. And we know that we're most effective when we're in communities, being visible and present, listening to the concerns of the communities. Whether it's foot patrol, bike patrol, our traffic officers enforcing traffic in different neighborhoods, officers getting out of their car, talking to neighbors in different neighborhoods, our school resource officers engaging in the communities they're in. We know that it's a crucial and important and one of the most important functions that we deliver. The list of community police activities that we engage in goes on and on. What we're going to talk to you tonight about is the specifics around how we plan to improve them and refine the gaps that we've seen over the past years in our delivery. So I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent McKenna to start to take us through that.
So some of the successes that we've had with our community policing is how we've addressed problem addresses. This goes in teamwork with support from the city, whether it's through our bylaw services or fire. We've had success in managing and addressing some problems with some hotels, some different theft from vehicles in some specific areas, but we've also had our own internal units, such as example the chief spoke about how we did identify a problem matters and how a drug unit then came and helped with search warrants at that property. We've also had success with a number of our POP projects. And how do we come into this information? Well, this is information where our community has identified concerns at a neighborhood level, whether it be at an address or at a business. This is also brought to us by our community police officers. We know in the South End we've had success with working with our Guns and Gangs unit and our pivot team and frontline deployment on specific areas there in relation to our shootings. And to date this year we've seized 4 crime guns. Our traffic services will continue to be evidence-based, meaning we have heard from the community via our online complaints that they send to us about specific areas. A recent example is the enforcement that our team has done in the Spratt Road area with regards to community concerns that have been addressed there. We know in the summertime that we have specific areas in the city where we have some concerns. Our Byward Market Initiative and Montreal Community Safety Project has addressed some of the social disorder issues that happen in that area, as well as petty crime. We have conducted media blitzes to inform the community that this is what is happening and this is what our teams will be doing in that area. We've received very positive feedback from the businesses and the communities in those areas. So what we have heard in identification of some issues and this is from our community police officers, this is from our online surveys that our community has completed, we have the capacity to listen and to identify concerns in our community. But now we need to work out how we can respond more in a better, timely manner to some of those concerns. We know that it's important that if you have a familiar face, if you have the same police officer that's coming to speak with you to deal with a neighborhood issue, we know that that is more effective. The community has told us. And most importantly, that is how you establish relationships, that it is through continuity with that same community police officer or the same officer that's going to address that problem. We have recognized that we do have a gap in how we dedicate police resources into solving some of those problems. And we're going to talk about how we're going to deploy our community response unit as well as our traffic unit to increase that capacity. We know that resolving social disorder issues at a neighborhood level to resolve them more quickly is much more effective because it's generally not a one call for service, it's generally a repetitive issue. And I'll turn it over to Inspector Bryden to further comment.
Suffering from a man cold here, folks, so bear with me. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The community input we receive is absolutely crucial to the success of our community policing model. So we will continue to discuss and identify issues, community-based issues, with our residents, our community associations, our city councilors, essentially anybody that needs or wants to be a part of those conversations will continue to do so and be included. Our community police officers are a critical part of those discussions. They are typically the first point of contact for residents in identifying those issues. We'll only look to ways to enhance those relationships and the networks and the contacts that they already have. Online reporting has made leaps and bounds since its launch. This is an area that we have built huge capacity in gathering information from sources that I would submit otherwise we wouldn't have gotten through conventional methods. Hate-based issues is a great example of that, in that the community has said we don't necessarily need a police officer to come to our house, to come to our workplace, for us to file a report or provide some information. In fact, we learned it was an inhibitor. The online reporting platform alleviates those pressures for us. Our work with MERIT, Multi-Agency Early Risk Intervention Tables, a community safety well-being initiative supported by Ottawa Police, who is working very closely with our community services and agencies in a risk-driven approach to building community resiliency, to reducing crime and victimization in neighborhoods. That work is specific to vulnerable families, vulnerable individuals in those neighborhoods. Our work around formalized community networks is up and developing. Again, a risk-based community model where the Ottawa Police works with community safety committees in our neighborhoods, and we co-develop joint action plans to combat, to address those issues that are identified by the community. Thank you. Folks, there's lots of ways that we're listening and receiving feedback and input. We've already begun to realign and enhance our resources and capabilities. Our frontline police officers, our community police officers work very closely together in coordinating responses to those identified social disorders, those identified community-based issues. Our crime data analysts are providing officers with information specific to crime and social disorder in neighborhoods they are working in currently. We have a couple of specialty teams on the front line who are responding to specific issues in our neighborhoods with Pivot and Bikes and Beats. In that, with respect to gun violence and the demonstrations that are unique to our downtown core, so Bikes and Beats and Pivot are taking on that. We're further building on this capacity, folks, with the development of a community response team. This community response team will have, the vision of that team is to have a citywide response, again, to the community-based issues, the social disorder that is identified to us. Again, that is a citywide response, so as far east, as far west, the downtown core, and the neighborhoods in the south end of our city, all inclusive. The staffing plan around that is to dedicate 10 officers this year in 2019, and hopefully an additional 10 officers next year in 2020. With the closing of schools across our city, We see the redeployment of school resource officers through our summer bike deployment initiative. This year was a huge success. We received tremendous amounts of feedback from community members, community organizations that felt the impact that these school resources had with, again, a citywide deployment and response to community issues. Other resources that are key to the success of our model, folks, is, of course, the traffic section that was spoken to a bit earlier, a marine dive trail that's taking care of the land and on the sea type portion of the community model, and, of course, our street crime. With respect to the community development section, folks, they are extremely active in various police community initiatives. Youth in policing, our Hoop Stars basketball program, the community ride-alongs that we are conducting, and our Futures program, to name a few. They are also the quarterback for larger events that we see experience annually with Police Week, which is up and coming in May, diversity celebrations, and human rights learning forums. Folks, we're privileged with OPS to have very strong partnerships with specific groups in our communities, and it's through different committees and councils that, such as the Community Equity Council, the Youth Advisory Committee, and the GLBTQ Committee, that we have that open dialogue, that direct line of communication with those groups to hear what challenges that they are facing that impact them on a daily basis. And that is, again, work done through the community development section, along with other facets of the community policing model as well. So I'll just wrap up by putting in a plug here for the community policing forum, again, which is up and coming and to be launched jointly with, during Police Week in May. Folks, an opportunity again for us to get together with the community, to educate one another on the model, how it's working, where we can be better, and an opportunity for us to just to promote what we are doing and how well we're doing it. And perhaps maybe to address some of the dialogue and communication around community policing. So I hope to see you there. May 13th, location is yet to be determined. And at this point, I'll turn it over to D.C. Bell for closing remarks. Thank you.
So as you can see from the information we've provided, we've done lots of work over the last period of time to make sure that we are listening to the community. We never abandoned community policing. We never moved away from it. But if the community's giving us feedback to say they're not feeling it the same way they did, it's important that we're responsive. And I think you're seeing us delivering on a plan that's being more responsive to the community needs. Whether it's the councillors, whether it's this board, community members, the inspectors and staff sergeants we have working on it, frontline members, I think what you see is a collective desire to make sure that we do deliver our policing service in a community-oriented fashion the best way we can. What we're doing is a work in progress. You've seen what we've already done. You've seen what's yet to come down the road. But what you have to know is we're going to continue to listen. We're going to continue to be responsive to community feedback to make sure that we're actually delivering our services in the best way that we can. So with that, I'll take any questions that you have.
Thank you. And there is a question, so we will start. But I just wanted to start because I heard you say something I didn't really agree with, so I'm going to give you a chance to clarify it a little bit, because I thought I just heard you say that you had never moved away from community policing. And you can't hear me?
Yeah, I still can't hear very well. Sorry.
Okay, so let me start again. I just wanted to talk about the statement that I just heard you made that the police service has never moved away from community policing, because that's not my understanding. I remember attending police services board meetings and asking the reduction in the 40 neighborhood officers not to happen, and the move away from community policing I never thought was in the community interest. My impression this summer when you did the strategic planning throughout the community, you got the message loud and clear from the public that they believe in community policing, as do I, that the police need to know the public and the public need to know the police, and building those strong relationships in the community is what matters and takes away a lot of problems by having that. I was under the impression the CRTs that are coming back, the 10, are in response to what you heard on the strategic planning from the community, that they wanted to see a return to community policing. So one, I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer that. because I didn't really agree with you saying we hadn't moved away from it. And then 2, I want to know if 10 is enough. I think that's what we all want to know, because my impression was we lost 40 and we're returning 10. So is that enough?
So on the community policing, I would actually stand by that we never abandoned community policing. We continued to have school resource officers. We continued to have community police officers. We had a lot of the infrastructure around that helped and assisted in deliver community policing. But I'm going to say actually the real test in it is, what's the community response? What are they feeling? And what we heard back from the community regularly was, we don't see the same level of service in terms of being responsive to low-level crime or social disorder issues in my neighborhood. So that for us was a post that we had to listen to. It was important that we were responsive to that. We've always been committed to working with our communities to solve problems in their neighborhoods, and that's what community policing is. When we developed our new model, what we did is we took away that contact point that they had previously. We're looking to start to again enhance that capacity so we can be responsive. So no, I don't think we moved away from community policing, but I also think it's incumbent on us that we're responsive when the community says we need to see you be more responsive more quickly, and I think that's what you're seeing here now. So is 10 enough? I believe that as we're rolling out our plan, what you've seen is you've seen 10 this year and 10 next year. So I do believe that 20 officers dedicated to this type of response, as they help build on the capacities that we see on the front line, that we see with our bikes and beats and our pivot teams, that they will be able to address the problems that are going to be identified for them. The model that we're going to use now will be different than it was before, because it's not going to be geographically based. One of the things that we were able to bring in was an operations or a command center. One of the things we also brought in was the ability to gather timely information from the community about what their key priorities and key problems are. We aren't going to geographically direct this team. What we're going to do is we're going to direct them to the highest priority problems in different neighborhoods to go in and start to resolve those issues. So that's the long answer to, when we get to the end of it with 20 people, yeah, I do believe that will be enough to meet this mandate. But that's something that we'll continue to evaluate and measure, and if there needs to be more, if there needs to be less, we'll make those adjustments.
I mean, feeling that the community that I represent have is that we have amazing community police officers. They're great. They've built amazing relationships with the community, and the community appreciates them. But they're spread thinner than they used to be, and that makes it more difficult. So I just want to understand what the community response team does. Are they going into, challenged neighborhoods and building relationships, or are they a SWAT team? They come in when there's a problem, and then they're gone, here today, gone tomorrow.
So they're not a SWAT team. I can say they're absolutely not that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start to build on what you started with. We have excellent community police officers. We know that. Every councillor I talk to talks about how strong the officer they have are there and how much they care for the community and the issues that are in those communities. So I can't say enough good things about the community police officers. I don't believe they're stretched too thin. I believe we have less than we did before, but the way that we've aligned them and the way that we've actually allowed them to start to bring information into the police service and then put it through our operations center in order to push the information out to have others respond to it is beneficial. Now what we have to do is we actually have to start to build capacity so that when they have a problem that they bring in that's identified, they have some levers to pull operationally to have people go and resolve these issues. So, and that brings us to the community response team. What they will be doing is going into neighborhoods and resolving problems that exist. No one problem in any neighborhood is the same as the next one in another neighborhood. So what we do know is that as we build the capacity of this team and as we build the skill sets and knowledge of this team, they'll be doing a host of different things. One day they may be in uniform providing proactive engagement in a neighborhood. Another day they might be doing surveillance on what's a problem address associated with drug trafficking. So it will largely depend on what the problem is they're addressing, what their activities will be. We do know that they and every other officer are strongly encouraged and expected to build strong ties to the community, and that means, like what our Bikes and Beats unit do now every day, getting out and engaging proactively with the people in that community, because that's the way we actually build community trust and community safety.
Okay, thank you. Member Egley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been a long day, so maybe I just didn't hear you right, but I'm confused about the rollout of this model. You're moving away from the geographical model, you seem to say. So does that mean that, and you talked about a point of contact, so does that mean as a ward councillor, putting on that hat, that I no longer have a single individual to contact about a particular community? I'm confused.
Yes, I apologize for that. So the community response team won't be geographically based. The model that people compare to had an east, a west, and a central group that were responsible for conducting the operations that were identified from a community safety perspective. They had an east NHO team, a west NHO team, and a central NHO team. This model won't exist like that. Your community police officers will still remain in your community exactly as they are now. That model doesn't change. We know how effective it is. The challenge that they have right now is you bring them an issue of an address that they need to respond to. We need to actually identify a group that they can give that issue over to be responsive and do the operational work around it. Your CPOs can't do it all. We know that. They will still be aligned as they are. We're just building their capacity to be able to respond to these issues in the community.
So we'll have the complement of CPOs we have now.
Absolutely.
Plus an additional 10 officers this year and an additional 10 officers the next year?
That's correct.
So 30 officers, because there's 10 CPOs now, right?
That's correct.
So at the end of 2 years, there'll be 30 people doing community policing in one way or another.
So I would actually argue there's many more than that, because there's 18 who are engaged with the Bikes and Beats unit. There's another just over 10 associated with the Pivot team. There's frontline community engagement work that's being done on a regular basis. So although you will have the same number of CPOs, 20 community response team officers, you'll then have the other numbers of the Bikes and Beats and the Pivots team to be able to deliver this work.
No, but again,
the CPOs, and the...
You're adding 20 additional officers over 2 years to the community policing model, correct?
That's correct.
Oh, okay. Well, if that's the case, that's not a bad thing. I want to go back to your point, though. You heard from the community that the contact point had been taken away. And when you rolled out the plan a couple of years ago, you told us over and over again there was going to continue to be a single point of contact for the communities. We didn't really believe that, but that's what you told us. And now you seem to be saying, well, you were right, we were wrong, there wasn't a point of contact, and we're going to bring that back. How are you going to bring that back?
So I don't believe I said we took the point of contact away. I actually think we've spent a lot of time making sure as an organization that we do have good points of contact, whether that be our community police officer.
What you said was you heard from the community that point of contact had been taken away, and you wanted to address that.
So what we heard from the community was the response to what that point of contact was hearing wasn't the same as it used to be. I can go and tell my community police officer that I have a problem address on my street, and I'm not getting the response to deal with that like I used to. The community police officer still exists to bring the information forward to, and we know we've actually built our capacity to listen to the community. Our problem wasn't the listening, it was the doing of the issues that were existing. So what we're now trying to do is build that dedicated unit that can be accessed by one of the avenues would be the community police officers in order to fix those issues that are identified.
Okay, and again, I'm cautiously optimistic. I always thought the changes to the community policing model were change for change's sake. We had a model that worked very well, that the community appreciated, didn't complain about, and you guys, for whatever reason, wanted to change it. And ever since then, we have felt it from our community. They've been upset with it. They haven't been happy with it. I mean, I was hoping when you're going to come back with a model, it was going to be, you know what, we're going to go back to what we used to do. It wasn't broken. We didn't need to fix it. So that's why I say I'm cautiously optimistic if you're adding these additional officers, but I still think the community would be happier if you moved back to the model that you had that worked. The other question or comment I wanted to make was around the online reporting for traffic. That is a constant point of frustration for members of the public. Members of the public do not want to do this. They do not want to have to go on every time they see a speeding vehicle in a school zone. They don't want to go on every time they see a speeding vehicle go by a park. If they say they're speeding from this, in front of our school every morning from 8 to 10, they do not understand, and they do not have the time in their busy lives to sit down and do it every day for the next 30 days, so you've got 30 complaints in from each person. They don't understand why it has to work that way. Didn't used to work that way. It used to work that the community association or the school council would go to the community policing officer or go to the counselor and say, this is an ongoing problem in front of our school, in front of our park, in front of the hospital, and you guys would send out some traffic enforcement to deal with that. It doesn't work that way anymore. And you can sit there and say it's working great, but I can tell you, as someone who gets the feedback from the community, it is not working great. The members of the community are very frustrated with that approach. They find the online reporting system clunky, cumbersome, time-consuming. They do not want to do it. And therefore, and part of that is they feel they're not getting any benefit for doing that. They feel that you're asking us to take our time out of every day, make these reports, and they don't know what the magic number is. They don't know how many reports you need, how many complaints you need. Before you press that button, you send a traffic enforcement officer out to that corner in front of that school. So if you're hearing that from the community, your community is very different from my community, and I suspect very different from a lot of councillors' communities, because that's certainly not what we're hearing. So if there was something that needs to be fixed in this, it's that online reporting system. If you want to continue to use it, you have to make it simpler. You have to give the community some sense of what they need to do, what target number they need to hit, because they're just frustrated. They're frustrated that they're going on, they're reporting, and nothing is happening. So that's more of a comment than a question, but it's what we're feeling every day.
Okay. Thank you.
If I can just make a few comments, Councillor. We did recognize there were some challenges with our online reporting, and we have made some updates, so I'll bring that back again to see what else can we do to improve that system. But we do recognize the community safety zones, such as our school zones, that we do targeted enforcement in those zones, because we know it's a community safety where we want our kids that get on and off the school bus to feel safe. We also brought heat maps to all of the councillors where it shows where we receive complaints, where we have accidents with injuries, and then where we've done our enforcement and it actually matches up quite well. So we do encourage your constituents to continue to report online. I know we hear it via Facebook accounts through our community police officers about the traffic complaints that you do receive. But I also know that we do manage all of the complaints that come in through the mayor's office, to the police service board chair, to our chief. And we have seen a decrease, but that's also because of the councillors encouraging their constituents to file online. Plus, we do take reports, traffic reports, through our call center where they have specific information, if they have a license plate, if they can identify the driver, and that is actually assigned to one of our traffic officers for a follow-up. So we are trying to get better with the online because we're aware of that frustration. But we do a lot of enforcement in our community safety zones. The other area is speed boards that the councillors do use, and once we do get a complaint in an area where there is a speed board, we do analyze that data and deploy our traffic officers there, so it's at the time when we are seeing people speeding, so that we're more effective in and where we deploy our resources.
And I appreciate the answer, but I'm telling you there's still significant frustration out there with that model. Community associations, parent councils, school principals do not understand why, if they tell you this is what's happening in our community, it's what we see every day, that you guys are not moving on it unless you get the data points on your online reporting system. I'll just leave it at that.
Madam Chair, I can speak to that as well. I think, if we're going to be intelligence-led policing and we're going to look at assigning our precious resources where we most need them, we need the data to enable to help us understand where the challenges are, where we need to invest those resources. We get a huge amount of traffic complaints. That's the number one complaint that we get across our community, and we're just trying to be smarter using technology and using data points to be able to help us put those resources where we need them, and also continue working with the councillor's office and the community associations to do an assessment to see exactly where we need to put those resources. But we understand there's still some gaps, there's some frustrations, but our teams will continue to work to address those.
Just a really quick point. I guess what I'm saying, Chief, is I'm not sure you're getting good data. If the community is throwing up its hands and saying we don't want to report anymore because we're not seeing the benefit, then I don't know that you're hitting the hot spots. And I guess the heat maps you're showing us are great because that correlates with your data. But if your data is wrong from the very beginning, then that's what I'm trying to get across to you. If people are not reporting, then you're not getting good data. And you're sending your people out to where you're hearing, but you're not hearing all of it because people are not reporting.
Yeah. And if I could just add to that, what worries me...
No, we've got a list. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to let you add to it, but there's a few other people on the list. No worries. Is that it, Member Egler? Is that it? Yes. Okay. Member Blaustein.
Hopefully I can be heard. So I have two questions, really. One of them is there any consideration being given to increasing the use of some of the community police stations, such as the one on MacArthur, which I passed every day for 2 years now, and I've never seen it open, unlocked, a police vehicle there, unless somebody's sitting in it. So that's just one that I'm familiar with, but I'm sure that there are other ones across the city that really are not being utilized, and we've got the space, and is there some sort of way that we can use them more effectively and more efficiently as a resource for the community members, the people who live in those neighborhoods on those streets, to be able to build relationships with the officers?
So on the bricks and mortar building around our community police centers, we have lots of data over lots of years that say that's not actually how the community wants us to engage with them. Those bricks and mortar buildings were not highly utilized. We used to have really extended hours there to create opportunities for community to come in, and that's not how they didn't come in. They didn't come and pick up the brochures. They didn't come and make the reports there. We've tried to make sure that we're providing service to the community in the way that they want to receive it. So that's why we've downscaled our hours in those different areas and created different opportunities for the community to come. So we don't get a lot of input from the community saying you need to increase the hours of those buildings, because that's how it would be most beneficial.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, I think that when you talk about community policing, you're having a vision of one thing, and I think that the community at large is thinking more neighborhood, geographic-based policing. And I think that's what they're really looking for from the people I've spoken to. I think that the city councilors would probably agree with that, but I'm not sure. That I think they're really looking for old-fashioned neighborhood policing that's geographically based, as opposed to the broader community policing as you define it.
So two pieces to that. One is I actually believe that community policing needs to be geographically based. It needs to be about officers engaging with the communities in the neighborhoods and communities that they're in, to have those discussions to figure out the issues. Like Inspector Bryden spoke about, we are having a community policing forum, and that's exactly where we want the community to come forward and work with us to help mutually define what they see as community policing. So although it is neighborhood and community based for us, we still want that input and have the community come so that we can work with them to define what they see as community policing.
I think that if you speak to probably a lot of the city councilors, and if you speak to, I've spoken to many community members, and I think that they've tried to define it very clearly, and I think it's not necessarily being heard, because they're saying community policing with a different vision. The interpretation is different, And so, you're agreeing on the word community policing, but you're not agreeing on the definition of what a community police officer really is, that it's somebody who's really dedicated to that geographic region as opposed to this broader view. So just...
Okay, thank you, Member Boston. Member Velikat.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. I'm talking about 2007, 12 years ago. When I was the ED of the Vanier BIA, we had a model that worked. And I see that Madame Lucie Villeneuve is sitting in the audience here representing the Vanier community. Thank you for being here tonight, Lucie. We worked very hard with the police in those years, and we came up with a model that worked. And I think BIAs are definitely one source. You have people like Lucie that work very hard within their communities that can provide you with the information that you're looking for. But I think there's a need to return to boots on the ground. I'm a big believer of policing 101, where it's a personal, one-on-one, informative exchange that takes place, and you have to build that trust with the community in order. And you've done it before, you can do it again. I have all the faith in you because I know how well you work. I think it's really good to have that BIA central. They have offices. The police officers in those days would come to us almost on a regular, everyday basis, and they would exchange information with our staff. They would have meetings in the evenings, during the day, with the residents that were invited to come to sit around the table, and we would identify together what the problem was and what the solution was. Because the residents understand they have to play their part. They know that. This whole business that's happening on Montreal Road, I remember the days of the Burger King. And Burger King was a very important player in our business community there. But it was work. Everybody had to get together to have those discussions. So I'm hoping that within your plan, you're going to have these geographical areas where you're going to be able to exchange, engage, bring them to the table in order to have those discussions. Thank you.
So one of the things we can speak about is actually the boots on the grounds that Vanier and other high-density areas are seeing through our Bikes and Beats unit. I know that since the beginning of January that there's been a considerable amount of time by that group, either speaking with the members of the BIA, but definitely with business owners up and down Montreal Road, as well as other areas in the city. So I am happy to say that we have already started that process, and we are seeing members of our service out walking the beats when it's allowed, when it's able, not right now, but they'll be riding bikes in those areas because we know how important that visibility and presence is within those communities. We also depend on our community police officers to start to have those conversations with members of the community like Burger King in order to make sure that they help us with the solution to some of the safety issues that exist.
Is that it? Thank you, Member Velikat. Member Meehan.
I'm very lucky because I represent a community where we don't have a high crime rate. And it just concerns me. I mean, I have great respect for our community police officers in that area, but it just concerns me that it seems, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but there's going to be a problem before we see a community response team come in. And I'd just like to say that, to validate what we're saying here is boots on the ground is important, even in low-crime areas, because I think it's better to be proactive sometimes to let the community know that the police presence is there than to be reactive when something happens. There's a great value in knowing that there's a police officer somewhere in your community.
So we absolutely agree, and the example is traffic. Traffic is a key concern in your area. Community response team isn't going to actually respond to a traffic issue, but as you know, our traffic unit will go and take on those issues within your ward. Every ward's different. Everybody has different community policing, community safety needs. Our CPOs do a really good job of working with the communities to identify what are the specific community safety issues issues in an area, like traffic, like problem addresses, like engagement of business owners, to make sure that it's not a one-size-fits-all for the entire city, but that we have the resources that we're able to deploy. The community response team, along with the bikes and beats and pivot and our traffic units and our school resource officers, will be another capacity for us to be able to reach into those specific needs within a community.
Senate Member Moon. Member Smallwood.
Thank you. There's been much mention of the Beats and Bikes unit, which I think is fantastic. It's wonderful. It has the guys out there and the girls out there, and you can see them. I just wondered, I know you are working on enhancing their ability to communicate and to do research on their handheld units, and I'm wondering, I assume that hasn't been rolled out yet, and what is the plan for that now?
Actually, it has. That's part of our frontline mobility project as part of our modernization roadmap. And I can tell you that those officers have been used as a pilot. They do now have handheld devices like many of our frontline officers do. And theirs are even more capable that they can use it like what a regular mobile data terminal would be used. So they have been rolled out, the latest equipment we have. They are piloting for us to be more able to more broadly deploy it. And so far, it's been very successful.
What length is this pilot, and when do you expect to be rolling them out to everyone?
So we are rolling out phones. All of our frontline officers will have handheld devices by the end of Q2 of this year. What we're doing is we're right now piloting for 90 days the actual software that they're using, the actual the information where they're accessing RMS. What we'll do from there is we'll decide how we need to tweak it or how we can better use it. What are the processes and business rules we have behind them using it to best support them before we more broadly roll it out. That group won't be losing that capability. They will continue to maintain it, and we'll refine that before we roll it out to all of our frontline officers.
Okay, thank you, Member Smallwood. Member Velikat.
I'd be curious, can you tell us exactly what that handheld will do that they don't have access to right now? And just for the purpose of everyone in the audience, can you tell us what PIVOT stands for?
I most definitely can. So PIVOT stands for, I'll start with that. It's the Prevention and Intervention of Violence in Ottawa. It's been a part of the rebranding efforts that Deputy Chief Jaswell has gone through to actually refine DART and the activities of what the old DART team did. So that's what PIVOT is. In terms of the handheld devices, so what they'll have is they'll have all the native features, which is in itself is very helpful. That's telephone calling, scheduling, emailing, texting. They'll have all those abilities, which we know in itself will save time. And the sky's the limit in terms of what other additions we give to them. Right now, what we're looking at is the mobile data terminal information, so they can access CAD and RMS. We know that we're looking for a wiki type solution that can help them solve how to deal with different situations. What's the paperwork I have to do for a drug-impaired driver? How you can go on a wiki-based solution to resolve that. It also gives them access to all of our current intranet information. That'll include rostering, scheduling, time-off applications. So to give them that power in their hands gives them much more capabilities, and we know will create efficiencies in what we're delivering.
So is that the equivalent of what the computer is in the patrol car?
So it will get there. Right now, it's a regular Samsung phone like we all carry. We will get to the point that it will be able to access, once security is resolved around, it will be able to access all our RMS, all of our internal documents, to be able to write and edit and update them. From a security foundational perspective, we're not at that point to roll it out to everyone, but we are quickly, through the modernization roadmap, moving towards that.
Any other questions? Well, maybe just to wrap up then, I was happy to hear your question on PIVOT, because I've been in an acronym haze since I took on this role. There's so many acronyms. I distinctly recall Deputy Chief Jill Skinner when she was talking about the community policing change in the model, saying it was a budget-driven exercise. And I just want you to have a takeaway from this discussion tonight that I think this board is very interested in seeing more of the geographical-based community police officers, boots on the ground in the neighborhood. That's what we all seem to agree worked best in our neighborhoods, and I think what we would like to see this new model move towards. So I think that's your takeaway, Deputy Chief, for tonight, and I'm sure you haven't heard the end of it yet, because once we get to budget, I think we'll be asking about how we're deploying our resources and how we're getting the most effective use of every one of our police officers in our communities. Oh, and now Member Meehan would like to add something.
Sorry, Diane. Could I just ask, how much is it going to cost us to put a handheld device in every officer's hands? Because I know it's expensive.
It's actually part of the modernization roadmap, and it's a package and a budget that's come before this board before and been approved by this board. The exact costing of the handheld device I don't have in front of me, but it is something that has been brought and approved by this board previously.
And you feel it's necessary?
Oh, absolutely. So we're already seeing efficiencies with officers having it, anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes a day of efficiencies that they're not in the office doing emails, doing scheduling, doing their workflow that is accessible from these now. That translates into boots on the ground in the neighborhood doing work. So far, anecdotally, an evaluation hasn't been done, but we are definitely seeing the returns that is allowing them to be in the communities more.
Because I really don't want to see the police officers walking around with their handheld with their head down all the time like the rest of us.
Neither do I.
Okay, anyone else? So received, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all of your input.
Item number 3, outreach recruitment. Who's leading this one? Deborah? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have the privilege now of updating you on our sworn officer recruitment activities. We usually come before the board once a year, and sometimes we're at the Human Resources Committee between times to bring you the news on how we're diversifying the workforce and the connected to the activities that are going on in the community. So tonight we've got our whole team here, and I'd just like to introduce everybody so that you can connect with who's responsible for recruiting at OPS. So I'm going to start with Superintendent Sterling Hartley, who is the superintendent that actually came into play in the spring of this year as we put an increased focus on recruitment and training. Inspector Mark Patterson should be here. You recognized him from, CrossFit training, I'm sure. As well, we have Acting Inspector Debbie Miller, who has been involved with recruitment for about 5 years now as one of our pillars, and our newcomer, Staff Sergeant John Mbakula, who has come into the unit this past month. So we're going to, if you don't mind flipping to the first slide, guys, and if you could pop that one up, John. Try that one. Can we go back 2 slides, Debbie? There we go. So tonight then we'll focus on a couple of things. We'll bring you up to date in terms of some of the efforts that we've introduced and are ongoing in terms of our recruitment. We'll talk about process changes, and I know that kind of sounds dry, but what we've learned as we've done our process workshops is that it's very important that we have an efficient process, because we want to be the first police service to make an offer to great candidates. And there's quite a competition for resources right now, so it's critical that we be able to get there first. You may have, it's hard not to see us out in the community right now doing outreach recruitment. We'll bring you up to date on our efforts and I think how successful we've been in the first 6 months of this campaign to increase our awareness with diverse and female candidates, because we know that those are groups that traditionally haven't come forward to policing. So if we can head to the next slide. So you've heard us talk about our recruiting challenge in terms of a 5-year horizon, and we always focus on the long-term plan for several reasons, and one is so that the community knows that there are 500 potential job offers from Ottawa Police over the next 5 years. So you may not be a candidate right now for policing, but you know that if you continue to work and set it as a goal, that there will continue to be opportunities for you. That's especially important for some of our candidates, such as university students, for whom the 2 or 3 year horizon is probably more realistic. In order to hire 500 sworn officers, and that's kind of our round number, it's between 400 and 500, we probably have to have 1,500 prospects come into our process. And that means that 1 out of 3, or almost 1 out of 4, will be successful. That's a somewhat high rate, a success rate compared to where we are right now, where it's more likely that 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 15 of our prospects is successful. So we're spending a lot of time looking at how we ensure that high performance, high potential candidates are who come into our process. You'll also see that as Debbie and John talk more about what we're doing, that we're really working on community-based, a community-based approach at community events, on social media and social network to help people realize how approachable and how realistic the goal is of becoming a sworn officer for a high potential, high performance candidate, but also to help ensure that the community has a chance to bring forward people that they know would make great police officers. So I'm going to ask Acting Inspector Miller now to talk to us about more about who we're looking for for our future officers.
Thank you, Director General. Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. Thank you for having us to come in and speak to you about the efforts that we have done over the last year and moving into 2019. So who are we looking for? We are looking for members within our community that meet certain hiring requirements. The first one is the Police Services Act, and Section 43, that explains to us who will fall under be able to be hired with us. So you have to be a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, at least 18 years of age, physically and mentally able to perform the duties of the position, is of good character and habits, and has successfully completed 4 years of a secondary school education or equivalent. You also have to be reflective of the community. We heard tonight about going to our community, working with our community members. Well, we want to make sure that our members reflect the community that we are serving. So we have put in great efforts to ensure that, to make everyone feel that they could be a part of the Ottawa Police Service. Then they have to complete Constable Essential Competencies. So there are certain competencies, you'll see there's 8 of them, that anybody that is looking at becoming a police officer has to meet. So you've got your analytical thinking, self-confidence, communications, self-control, relationship building, achievement orientation, medical and physical skills and abilities. Once you've been able to demonstrate that you have met these competencies, then we're also going to look at your work and life experience. We want to know, what are you bringing to our service? Are you out in our community? Are you volunteering in our community? So we're going to look at that, and we're going to put all this together and then determine from there whether or not you can make a good candidate to be a member of the Ottawa Police Service. The challenges that we face. Ottawa Police is not the only police service looking at hiring candidates. We are looking at hiring 500. So we're in a highly competitive recruitment environment. So what we want to do, we want to make ourselves step out of the box and be the one that people want to think about coming to our service. However, the views of becoming a police officer, they're challenging, they're changing. Not everybody wants to be a police officer. The role of a police officer has changed over the last 10 years. It's physically demanding and mentally demanding. So we have to go out into our community to still let people believe, yeah, it is a viable profession, and that we have the tools and skills. We'll give you the tools and skills to be a great police officer. Recruiting millennials. Love the millennials. You know why? Because they are challenging us on how we go out and recruit in our community. They're making us change our ways of recruiting. Gone are the days of waiting for the candidate to come to us, sitting in our office. We're going out into our community, and we're going to get those millennials. We are using social media. You'll hear a little bit more about how we're using it, but they have allowed us to step out of the box and change the way that we bring in our next generation of police officers. No longer is it considered a profession, maybe. Maybe it's just a job. I'm going to be here for 10 years. Okay, we're going to make it the best 10 years that you're going to be here. But the other thing that you get to see is that it's a job with many jobs within a job. So we're out there letting people understand that that's what it is. Commitment to adequacy standards. We're not lowering our standards. We're keeping our standards there. We're getting the best of the best that want to come to Ottawa Police and be a member of our service. And again, it's not just a recruiting team effort. It's a whole organization effort. We're getting our patrol officers, we're getting our community police officers that are going out into the community, talking about what they do, answering questions, answering concerns that are happening within our community. So it's an organizational commitment to ensuring that we're out there recruiting the best of the best. 2018 recruitment improvements. What have we done? Thanks to the board by giving us permission to bring on an outreach recruitment team, we've brought in a sergeant, 3 constables, and a civilian member. These members are specifically chosen because of their community contacts, their reputation within the community and within our service alone. They're also reflective of the community. So now that they're going out into the community can see themselves within our service. We've expanded our employment screening officers. So that's at the background stage. So after all the information is put together, we send out an employment screener to put that together, to do the background research, to find out information about who you are and verify that. We've expanded that by 6 sworn officers who are specifically dedicated to going to do these screenings. We do have retired members that are out there doing that as well, but these members are specifically assigned to doing that. This has alleviated the backlog when we came to you before that we had. And then what else are we doing? We've had a process workshop. We've had a couple of them. We've listened to the concerns that the community has given us, listened to the concerns of candidates who have gone through our process who may not have been successful. And we realized that we needed to review our process, streamline it so that it's not cumbersome, and you will see as John will go and present the diagram of how difficult it has been for a candidate to go through our process. Through this review, through the feedback, we've been able to streamline it. We've improved our employment screening tools, so we actually have a standardized form that the employment screener puts the information in, so everybody is putting in the same information. Instead of having 300 pages, which we never do, but a report that may be 40 as opposed to one that's 100, now we've got it where everybody's handing in the same there. So that's some of the improvements that we have done. The outreach team. So we brought them on July 3rd, 2018. They have attended community events. They have attended job fairs. This past weekend we were there with the chief and the deputies at Black History Month. They set up a booth. They're everywhere. If anybody is on social media, you can't miss us because we are there. As I talked about, the millennials have allowed us to kind of go out and look at how we're going to bring in our newest members. We're using social media. We have a high presence on social media. We're also doing virtual ride-alongs and information sessions. So if you can't come to our information session, we are live on Instagram. We're also on Twitter, and you can actually send us questions when we're having those sessions, and we'll answer them. The chief has piped in as well and answered some of those questions. We're realizing that there are some people who actually have to work, and policing is going to be their second profession because they couldn't do it the first time. They can't come to these information sessions. So how can we engage them and engage a wider audience? By using social media as a means, as a tools.
The information sessions, the feedbacks that we're getting, we are seeing more and more people attending the information sessions in person and also on our Instagram feed because they want to learn about what it is that we're doing. And then we had a partnership with OSEG. We established that partnership, and we realized that bringing in sports, it's a universal language. This is a language that we can come together with our communities, go into our communities, and engage them. Again, boots on the ground, recruiting team are part of that boots on the ground. And so those are some of the ways that we are engaging our community. Strong focus on diverse community and female candidates. As we have already talked about, we want to be reflective of our community. So we're engaging those communities that typically wouldn't consider policing or shied away from policing. We've gone in and had those conversations and listening, why wouldn't you consider policing, and advising them how we have changed as an organization and what we are doing to address the issue of not having enough representation within our communities. Female candidates, we are focusing on them as well. As you know, we spoke before, we have the women's only prep workshops. So the prep workshops are the physical fitness component of getting your ATS certificate. So a candidate typically doesn't get to practice the actual prep tests. We've allowed them to come in to Algonquin College, and also now we have a new partnership with La Cité Collégiale where they can actually try out the equipment and know where they need to focus their energies on. So this partnership has allowed us to now bring on women so that they feel that they're comfortable and ready to go in and do the actual physical fitness test. We're also having our women's only information sessions where they can come, have a discussion. We have female officers that will talk to them because we get a lot of questions about, I'm a parent. Can I really do this job? I have to go away to police college for 3 months. We explain to them, we all are parents, or we have children, or we have those concerns, and how we were able to get through it with the support of our organization and our members within there. And we are, at these workshops that we have, the feedback has been phenomenal. They always fill up real quick, and so we try to add more workshops so that more people get a chance to come in and try it. And also the demand was, okay, well, the males wanted to do that. So we actually have, where we have males and female workshops as well. Because when you go to do the physical fitness testing, it's not just women that are there. So we want to create the environment that they're going to go into. So since having the recruitment team, our 2018 results, these approaches have been making an impact. We have significantly increased our applicant pools. Since July 3rd, and having the outreach recruitment team, we have 442 prospects generated through them. 27% of them are females. 50% are estimated to be racialized candidates. Our hiring for last year, we've exceeded our goal. We wanted to hire 72. We hired 78. The breakdown is there. We have 81% are males, 19% are females, and 23% are racialized. So again, that's from July 2018. You will see more of the efforts of the outreach recruiting team as we move into 2019, and excited to see what the results are going to be from that. So I'm going to pass it over to my partner, John.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. Thank you for having me here for my part of the presentation. As Acting Inspector Miller has spoken, our focus now is on the application process itself. Our process, we have known it to be too long, inefficient, and jeopardize our ability to hire the best qualified candidates and or risk losing them to other police services and non-policing employers. Work has started in the past and is currently ongoing to achieve a job offer for a potential applicant within 2 to 6 months. As the next slide will show, our previous process was a multi-stage process built with several redundancies as well as many sequential steps. A potential applicant to the Ottawa Police Service would take anywhere between 6 months to 2 years to complete this process by the time we're ready to present this person with a letter of employment. During this time, some applicants we have known to leave for other employers or other police services, and we have known this not to be a very efficient process, and we have started work in the past year, and currently I'm going to streamline this process, as the next slide will show, to make it a much more robust process where applicants can enter our application process and be able to know the results within 2 months to 6 months from the beginning. The work will still keep on proceeding to try to streamline this process even further in order that we can ensure that we remain the most competitive service in terms of hiring the best applicants from Ontario as well as across Canada. Currently, the constable selection system that we adhere to in terms of our application process continues to be a significant barrier for a lot of our applicants. The candidates have to incur expenses and travel as the process and the testing dates are not in Ottawa every month. Sometimes they only come to Ottawa once every 3 to 4 months, and oftentimes candidates have to travel to the Greater Toronto area or other places in Ontario to be able to take the tests. It is difficult for applicants to prepare for the physical portion of the test, as the constable selection system has some testing equipment that is only that is their intellectual property, and other facilities are not equipped to be able to provide this test for people to practice. Further, candidates have to renew this testing process in order that they remain valid in the process. And for many, it also means traveling again outside of Ottawa and incurring additional expenses to remain valid in the process. Of particular concern is that the constable selection system has seen a low female success rate in its applicant testing, and the demographics are not reflective of the community. ATS, Applicant Testing Services, in the 17-year results from 2001 until 2018, has seen 72,269 applicants. Of the applicant total, 83% were males and 17 were females. The initial round of testing for the applicants going through the process indicated that 63% of males passed and 42% of females passed this testing. Obviously, this is of concern to us. Currently, other police services have opted out of the constable selection system, and others still are looking at ways of modifying them. As a service, we also are exploring avenues of moving beyond the constable selection system and trying to determine what an effective recruitment process is for us in order that we can remain competitive in selecting the best applicants to policing in Ontario. Thank you.
Just to wrap up then, for the coming year, you'll see almost everywhere, and you can follow them on their social media handles. They're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And they're having great success, so we want to see that continue throughout the year. We'll be working on the application process. You saw that our goal is to maintain the standards, but to become more efficient at it. And there's a strategic decision to be made this year about whether we continue to use the constable selection process, specifically the ATS testing part of it. So we'll be looking at that data that the province has provided, which is actually gold for us. It's great to have some evidence-based information on which to make that decision. So we'll check in annually with the board in January of next year, and we'll be happy to report to the Human Resources Committee and provide updates as requested. We can report back on our progress and give you some feel for what the candidates are looking for our next 500 jobs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. There are some questions, starting with Member Smallwood.
Thank you. I'm going to lose my voice midway through this. Perhaps I'm misunderstanding this or misreading it. The title on one of your slides, 2018 recruitment results, it says hiring our classes, which I don't really understand what that means. But if it's saying that out of all those that were hired, 81% were male and only 19% were female, to me this would be a failure, because we're already at 23%. So it would seem to me that this isn't positive news. This is actually negative news, but hopefully I'm misreading this. And I'll just, I had one other question which I'll toss into that. I have an outstanding inquiry which I'm sure you're familiar with, and I noticed in your business plan closeout you mention the importance of tracking race and gender at various stages of the application process, and you expect the results of the diversity out and so on. We still don't have a time, and I think this is so important to find out where people are failing. You're tracking the data. When will the board get to hear this data that you're tracking? Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, I'll deal with the questions in order. You're exactly correct. The number that of our proportion of hiring in 2018 of female candidates is lower than the current proportion within the police service. We currently have 23% of women in the police service. Our last year's efforts produced 19%. And when we talked about that as a group last week, I think what you saw were the activities that we had to cancel before the new outreach team came on. So we were struggling as you saw, to process, because we have an inefficient process, we're struggling to process the candidates that we had in 2018, and we had to choose to eliminate some activities, and some of that was the outreach we were doing with women. And you see the impact here. We weren't able to maintain the 23%. As our outreach team has come on, though, you can see that they are very visible in the women's community, and that more than almost half of their outreach efforts are with women. So what we saw then is the investment the board has made in the outreach team will ensure that we have more women candidates in the pool for our 2019 and 2020 classes. So, Madam Chair, that's the answer to the first question. The second question is, we've started that the data that we have on the screen that shows that we're tracking now as we go through the process, we'll be able to take that data. It's a little bit manual still. That's something we're working on through the modernization roadmap. But we'll be able to take that data and show you at each point in the process what the success rate is by gender and by racialized candidate. And we'll bring you that. How about we bring you that in Q2 to the Human Resources Committee?
Can I add to that, Madam Chair, as well? I think it's like we've talked before. It's indicative of a broader systemic issue at the provincial level with processing and the success rate of women in the process, and that's why you've seen some changes that we've done locally to help them at the front end. Be more successful in understanding what the physical testing is, mentoring them and helping them through, so that when they do go to ATS, we're increasing their success rate. The province, at the provincial level, there needs to be more work done to ensure that they are removing those barriers that exist, not only for women but for members from the racialized community, so that a broader pool of candidates are applying. So we are making those efforts at the local level to deal with those broader systemic issues at the same time.
Thank you. I still don't understand, though, why we went from having 23% success rate before to dropping down to a 19%. I understand that things didn't go, but I would have thought the things that didn't get rolled out would have brought us above 23, not below 23. We seem to be going backwards.
It's about the pool. It's about the number of qualified candidates that are there, and the efforts that we are now engaged in to try to increase, at least at the local level, a broader pool of women that can be attracted to policing, and having them succeed through the myriad of tests that they have to do through the applicant testing services to become constables. So it is. I think I want to also note, on the racialized side, 23%. That's a success story as far as achieving and making milestones in that area. But clearly, last year was a difficult year to attract women, but I'm very pleased with the amount of effort that is being done in changing our processes and do the amount of outreach and the numbers that we're seeing as far as increasing that pool of candidates, which hopefully will have a greater success rate at the provincial testing levels so that they can be successful applying here.
Okay, thank you, Member Smallwood. Member Blaustein.
Thank you. My question was essentially the same as Member Smallwood's. Actually, it was, are there consistent areas where women are failing, consistent areas where racialized communities are failing, and if so, what are we doing to explore that? And I won't assume, but I would hope that if we're finding that there are consistent areas, that this may determine our end result on whether we're going to stay with this constable selection process, so that we can ensure that we've got the right candidates, but that we've also got a fair process for everybody without diminishing the quality of our officers, which I think is also a key thing that needs to be said. We can't let our quality diminish. I think we've got a top-rate service right now, but we do need to ensure that there's a more balanced process for those who may be struggling with certain areas. So it's basically the same as Member Smallwood. I just wanted to say that.
I think we can help the board understand more of what happens within the applicant testing service. Perhaps that's something we bring to the Human Resources Committee in Q2. The 17 years worth of data helps to focus on that. It provides information about within the 4 components of ATS at what point candidates drop out. By their focus is by gender. There's some information by race, and we should be able to then see whether strategically either those barriers can be removed or whether they need to be replaced with a different system. But as the chief said, right now, going into ATS, only 17% of the candidates are women, and more than about half of them fail. So that leaves a very small pool for us to choose from. And when we didn't have the resources last year to help train the women on the applicant testing service, which is what Debbie spoke about, that we do prep test sessions so they get to see the equipment, then those female numbers actually go down. So now we're investing our resources in helping to have upfront sessions to train them, which should increase the number of women going into ATS, and then now we need to understand more about what creates the barriers inside that process.
Is that it, Member Blaustein? That's it. Thank you, Member Velikat.
Hi. You did some great work. I remember this discussion from a year and a half ago or so, and you seem to be doing a lot. You're getting into it. You're digging down, and you're finding some great new ways, creative new ways of approaching the problem. I do have some questions for you, though. First of all, it would be great if you put on the website when your next session is going to take place. The next one is on February 13th, I believe, and I couldn't find anything on the website that told me where it was going to take place. And I know you're all over social media, but I think the web is another good way. And I mean, you have a great definition there, and you promote the recruiting and everything, but I couldn't find anywhere on the website where the event on February 13th was going to take place. So that's one observation. Where is it that women commonly fail? Tell me where it is. What is it about? Where specifically do they fail? And I appreciate the fact that you're holding sessions for women only. I think that's fantastic. I couldn't, applaud that more. And I'm sure that you're creating a new bond with women if it's just women together, if I'm understanding that correctly. And the third one, I think the chief spoke about the constable selection system. I think for the public's sake, it would be really interesting for you to tell us what is the constable selection system and why is this an issue for us here in Ottawa in recruiting? Thank you.
Madam Chair, women disproportionately fail the physical test which is under the PrEP. Utilizes a system that requires women to take, as all applicants, a push-pull section where by not having access to that equipment you can't practice on. So anecdotally we've been told that it's better suited for somebody that's heavier, particularly up top, has great upper body strength. So that's where we've seen more women fail than men. Second question regarding the constable selection system. This is a provincially created system under the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police that provides, it's a prescriptive process and provides for stages for an applicant to enter the process. It revolves around a series of interviews and they have been including a questionnaire that all services that adhere to this process must follow, and in order for the services that partake in it to essentially have one global recruitment process. Why it's an issue for us is that it's a very long, convoluted process, oftentimes with many sequential steps that will be better run concurrently. Applicants that enter the constable selection system and at the onset of it having to take the tests through applicant testing services have to pay oftentimes upwards of $400 to remain current in the test. The RCMP and as of January 1st the OPP have removed that component. Therefore we are now having to compete with services where applicants don't have to pay. So given a choice between paying to apply to an employer and not paying, anecdotally we have received phone calls or potential applicants have approached us indicating they would rather prefer that they don't pay for these things. Services that have, as of January 1st, the OPP, they've seen a fourfold increase in their applicants over the same period of last year. For the first 17 days alone in January, the OPP had approximately 62 applicants. This year, they had 313, only because they have, and the only thing they've done different is they removed the applicant testing services requirement where applicants have to pay to take these tests. So for us, it puts us at a competitive disadvantage because now not only do applicants have to pay, but oftentimes ATS doesn't come to Ottawa only every 3-4 months. So if somebody is not even available that day, they can either choose to travel outside of Ottawa, sometimes going to Toronto or Sudbury, or just have to wait another 3 months. And by the time they apply, again, we go further behind. Thank you.
Okay. Is that it, Member Valiquette? No?
One, just to follow up.
Yep.
So 2 questions then. Do you go outside of Ottawa to recruit? And secondly, if the OPP and the RCMP have removed this cost, what do we need to do in order to make it affordable for people to apply? Like, there has to be a solution to this. It doesn't make any sense to me that they're able to remove the cost and we can't, or we can't make some kind of... Do you have any ideas or thoughts on that?
To answer your first question, we definitely do go outside of Ottawa. We've gone even provincially across to Quebec. We've gone to the Greater Toronto area, the GTA, just because it's the density of applicants, and we will continue to do so. The second question, we're also looking and having communication with other police services about exploring other alternatives to ATS and the constable selection system because we want to remain competitive. We will be looking at alternate processes for this thing in order that we have a streamlined and appropriate recruitment tool that identifies the best candidates in a timely fashion. So this is something that over the next coming weeks and couple of months, we will be actively exploring an alternate process.
Thank you. Next item that was held is item number 6, 2019 budget directions and timetables, and I held that. So I think my question is probably for you, Chief, but It has to do with the recommendations in the report. The first recommendation says receive the budget direction from Council of a 3% tax rate increase based on an estimated 1.5% growth in assessment-based growth. And then the second direction is direct staff to prepare the 2019 draft operating and capital budget so as to reflect the pressures and solutions identified during the Executive Command review of the draft budget. So if I turn to page 2 of the report and I look at under the discussion section, staff has been developing a budget proposal since the fall. This work has led to a budget proposal that is above the goal of 3% tax increase for 2019. It currently sits at 5.1%. So I just want to be clear. Are we directing staff, based on number 2, to prepare the draft operating capital budget so as to reflect the pressures and solutions? We are directing you to prepare that budget that you have identified at 5.1%.
That's correct, Madam Chair. The first one is something we had to include in the board report because of direction by Council. But the direction to us was to prepare a budget that meets our needs, and it is coming in at 5.1%, $18 million increase.
Thank you. Any other questions? Member Aguilar.
Yeah, I'm confused. So Chief, you're saying you're working towards a budget of 3%, like everybody else in the city, or are you saying you're working towards a budget of 5.1, or is it 5.1 plus the additional 1.5 growth, so really 6.6?
That's correct. The assessment growth is not included in the 5.1, so it is a 6.6.
So it's not 5.1.
Well, we don't, when we speak to the tax rate increase, we speak to it without the assessment growth.
Okay, so you're looking at an overall increase of 6.6 then?
Correct.
Okay. So to the Chair's question, so Council's directed a 3% tax increase, and again with the 1.5% estimated growth. So you're saying you're not working towards that goal, or you are working towards that goal? Or are you working towards a goal of 6.6?
I'm working towards a goal of producing a budget that we feel will meet the needs of the police service, meets the needs of their community, and that budget that would be tabled on February 6th is going to be an $18 million increase over last year, which translates into a 5.1% tax increase, not including assessment growth.
So you're telling us that when you table, it won't be in accordance with Council direction.
That's correct, and we've also been directed to work with city staff to try to find alternative funding sources in order to keep the $18 million increase, but to mitigate the tax increase.
Okay. So I just, are we receiving this or voting on this?
We are voting on it. We are directing them to build the budget, and I guess what I want to point out to you is Council can suggest to the Police Services Board, but Council cannot direct the Police Services Board. So what we're hearing from the Chief is the pressures that they're facing. That's what they're going to show us. They're working with the city staff currently and with the staff and police services to mitigate some of those costs. But they're going to keep it real. They're going to show you what it costs to provide the level of service in this community that they believe they need.
So I guess, and I don't know if this is a question for legal or not, but if we vote in favor of the report, which seems to have contradictory recommendations, are we then bound to accept the budget if it comes in at 6.6?
No, you're not. You'll review the budget and make your decision based on it.
So this is instruction as opposed to pre-approval?
Correct. You haven't seen the budget yet.
Right. But to the chief's comment, you seem to say you're going to be tabling a budget which shows an $18 million increase, which is going to translate into a 6.6% increase.
I'm going to be tabling a budget on February 6th that represents our pressures, which at this point in time are an $18 million increase. And we've been directed to work with the city staff to try to see if they can mitigate the police tax increase by exploring different funding sources from the city for 2019.
So in that regard, are you working with Ms. Similik and her team? Is that how this is working, or?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
You will recall at the City Council meeting, I directed that the city manager and the city treasurer meet with the chief and myself to discuss the budget. We have had that meeting, and I don't want to frame this as 6.6 because everybody gets growth. That's just to deal with more people in the city. Everybody gets that. But the budget that they're preparing is based on what the chief believes is the tax requirement to meet the demands for policing in this city. And so my view is we should take a look at that. We should see what the chief believes that we need. So we should direct him to bring us a real budget, and then we can discuss how we mitigate it.
No, and I only need the 6.6% because we're a public body. We have members of the public here. I want them to understand what the question is. So the question at the end of the day isn't 5.1, but we understand the budgetary process, but not necessarily everybody in the gallery or everybody who's going to read the newspaper tomorrow morning understands it. So that's why I wanted that number to be out there.
I respectfully would say that don't compare it to a 3% direction. Compare it then to a 4.5% direction.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. And again, I just wanted clarity because what we've heard from at large is people can live with a 3% increase on a 1.5. So I thank you, Mr. Wright, for clarifying that all we're doing here is asking the question, and we're not giving any prior approval. We still have the right to say down the road, we don't accept this budget. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Member Mann.
Chief, what is the difference in dollars between 4.5 and 6.6? How many millions difference between those two percentages? And if you had to live with the 4.5, like what are you looking at? What's it going to cost the service?
Madam Chair, I haven't tabled the budget yet, and I would respectfully suggest that when we table the budget on February 6th, then we can have that type of discussion and show you the different scenarios if you wish to explore. And looking at those specific numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Carried on the report? Carried. Thank you. Item number 9, I believe it was held by Member Valakat.
Thank you very much, Madame la Présidente. I have just a quick question regarding that report, and I'll direct you to page 6 of the report, where we have a list. All tasks were completed with the exception of the following, which have been added to the 2019 plan. There's a total of 8 items. One in particular that caught my eye is the development of a board crisis communications plan. I know that we've been talking about this for quite some time, and I would like to hear from our executive director on how feasible all of these are going to be done in 2019, but particularly number 14. Thank you.
So a lot of these items carried over, and we're still in the process. For example, budget carried over because of the council municipal election, so that won't be an issue. Same with our strategic planning process, just with the transition on the board, so that work is continuing. As far as the board crisis communications plan, that is getting carried over to the Policy and Governance Committee. It's not a time-sensitive item, so I guess it'll depend on what's on the plate for P&G this coming year, but I don't see any issues with being able to get that developed in 2019.
Okay, so you have a question?
I think the same thing for Krista. It mentions board training. Does that mean that new members of the board can avail themselves of some training?
Yes, if you, one of the reports on this agenda includes all of the webinars coming up this coming year with CAPG. There's also opportunities to participate in OAPSB's fall labor seminar, as well as they have a spring conference. So all new members especially are encouraged to go to those, as well as CAPG's annual conference in August. Okay. So if you want to mark those off in your calendars, those are good training opportunities.
Thank you. Okay, so received and carried. Next held item, item number 12, 2016 to 2018 business plan closeout report, Vice Chair Smallwood.
Thank you. I want to start off just by saying, Chief, congratulations on your upcoming retirement, and I want to say how much I've appreciated working with you over the years. I'm saying this in part because I have a negative comment here, but I wanted to say that reading through this,
still have a few meetings left.
You've done a lot of really good things, and I think it's really important. And reading through it, I saw some of the really great things that have happened. One of the things that I thought was not under the category of successes was the community policing. I think we've heard a lot about it here today so far, and I really thought the report failed to acknowledge that what I think in the community was seen as a failure. I know I went to all of the community meetings that we held, and there really was a sense that we got that wrong. And I think because this is part of our record, I think and I think we learn from our mistakes. So I would appreciate if this report acknowledged that there was, I think D.C. Bell mentioned, gaps. We didn't get it right. And I think we really should acknowledge that and just say we're going to learn from that and we'll go forward. For whatever reason, I think it's important. My sense of reading this was there was a lot of good news, but we didn't talk about what I think was one not so great piece of news. So and I had one little question, and that is, what's a thermal camera? A thermal camera. We're apparently putting them in. We've put them in. Page 6 of the report says installed thermal cameras along O'Connor Street. I didn't know what a thermal camera was or what it does. Right here? Oh,
Okay, I'm told that's for the bike lane on O'Connor Street, that we worked with Safer Roads Ottawa and traffic management to help us make those lanes safer.
So does it read a bike going by?
It helps, I think, with the there's some it triggers some other lights on those posts.
Okay.
In order to create advanced
turns.
warning. At high collision intersections.
Okay. Sorry for that trick question. Thanks very much. Thank you.
So just to Vice Chair Smallwood's point about the report and reflecting accurately what do you want to do about that? You just want to raise it?
I would appreciate it if we could add that to the report and resubmit it to us, if that's acceptable.
We can certainly do an addendum to the report to reflect some of the lessons learned and what we're doing to address the gaps.
Okay, I think that'd be great. So we'll just give you that as a direction. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So received on item 12. Item 14, also Vice Chair Smallwood.
This is with respect to what are sometimes called street checks or regulated interactions. On Tuesday, January 8th, members of the board, along with members of senior command of the Ottawa Police Service, met with Justice Michael Tulloch for a briefing on his report of the Independent Street Checks Review. Justice Tulloch noted how the issue of street checks has been distorted and consequently become very polarized. He mentioned that police boards have a leadership responsibility in terms of helping to frame the conversation and reshape the narrative. His report contains a number of recommendations. I would like to put forward a motion to refer Justice Tulloch's report and recommendations to the board's Policy and Governance Committee for review and discussion on any actions the board should take.
Okay, thank you, Member Smallwood. Do you have a seconder? Okay, Member Aguilar will second. Any discussion about referring that? Okay, carried and received on the report. Thank you. Okay, and that's the end of the public agenda. So now I just am going to ask